Hello everybody, welcome to our How to Use Twitter Effectively for Business, Advocacy and Policy webinar. I'm Owen Linderholm and I'm the moderator. We have two great speakers. Anamitra Banerjee from Twitter is responsible for business uses of Twitter, and Chris Abraham of Abraham Harrison is one of the leading practitioners of using Twitter and other social media platforms for real-world uses. We want to be clear that each speaker today is representing their organization and point of view, and should not be assumed to support or agree with each other's point of view. Anamitra is going to speak first. Over to you, Anamitra.
Before we begin, I wanted to give you a quick background about Twitter in general, and I won't be speaking for too long. And maybe even before the background, I think one of the things I want to touch upon is our situation. What we are talking about today is a growth story, and relative to what's going on all around us in this country as well as outside, most things are in a decline. I think we should feel privileged that we are, as a group, talking about something which is focused on growth. For most people, when they start off on Twitter or when they are on Twitter, it doesn't. The appeal doesn't quite come through immediately, especially when it comes to sharing mundane details. For instance, when John is sitting in a San Francisco airport, he's having a drink at the bar, and that's what he types into his Twitter stream, his followers, most of them may not find that very useful. However, if his high school buddy Dave happens to be at the same airport at the same time, sees that message, joins him at the bar, has a drink, they both come up with brilliant ideas of working together and open a new business and change the world, that makes sense to those two guys. We think of Twitter as some kind of a social alchemy, which enables social alchemy in general, where seemingly valueless bits of content is shared and discovered by the right person at the right time. It's sort of like an alchemical reaction that takes place. It turns lead into gold in a way. And we're seeing that more and more. However, this all started as something very, very basic, like that drawing you're seeing on your screens. And that is the screen that Jack Dorsey, one of the co-founders of the company, came up with. And the idea was, how can we make what we see in instant message applications, the away messages, could we enable sharing of those messages across groups in real time? That was the foundation of this company. And even today, the screen is pretty much simple, just like what you see in front of you now. Over a period of time, what we thought was simple suddenly became something very powerful to a lot of people. And we were observers of this as much as anybody else. We found folks in LA some time ago when during the fire events, several, I think it was last year, began to use Twitter in a significant way to share information, especially the emergency services. We saw the same thing take place during the earthquake, and again, similar events during the Bombay terrorist crisis on November 26th last year. Folks were actually tweeting out what they were seeing around the scene of the incidents. That became, for a lot of people, the primary source of information. And again, we saw in Moldova, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, folks there where you began to use Twitter not as a social networking platform, but rather as a communication platform. And we're frantically use cases large and small are sort of prevalent across Twitter, and all it takes is sort of going through the stream. That sort of lays down what we are seeing as some of the ways people are using Twitter in the larger sense. This focus is on companies, and what I'm going to do now is sort of walk you through some early ideas and some early use cases that some companies are putting Twitter to good use for. Now, a couple of disclaimers here. One is these are just some examples. There are many more, and you guys probably know more than I do for sure. All I'm trying to do here is sort of surface a few that I found a little interesting. And my goal here is to spark newer ideas and to get folks thinking and start communicating. We think of people who are consumers of Twitter to have as strong a stake in Twitter's future as we do ourselves as employees. and then we're hoping to build a strong business together. The first thing to do, and this always sort of gets folks excited when I meet with companies, is go to search.twitter.com and type in anything that you're interested in, your company name or your category or your brand or your service, and see what people are saying about you. It's somewhat of a aha experience for some companies to find that there are folks out there who are dedicated, passionate advocates of their brands, some not so much maybe, but it just opens up their eyes to all the chatter that's going around. And one of the things we're going to do is surface search more and more as a prominent interaction point for users, because we think the discovery of Twitter, the discovery engine as it can become, is quite powerful. There are a number of use cases that companies are using Twitter for. One thing that's clear is that it can become an utility that can span various functions within an organization of various types, large and small organizations, brand and direct response, PR departments in their group, marketing departments, HR departments. It doesn't really matter. And what I've seen is that on the far left column, there are a number of companies that are using Twitter to do customer relationship management of some sort, or answering questions. Others who are using it for reputation management of some form. Then the folks in between, some of them are using it to get real-time feedback on products and inform the supply chain process sometimes. It's usually wired today as an event promotion vehicle as well as issue advocacy. Promoting, for instance, the Green Marriott brand is something very powerful. And on the far right, several other companies are using Twitter exclusively to focus on product promotion or service promotion to drive direct sales or to drive traffic. What is interesting, though, is that a company can use Twitter across all these use cases, or a company can use Twitter in just one of these use cases. And I think one of our goals is to get companies more and more interested in Twitter and get their feet wet, begin to learn and begin to understand what Twitter can do for them. It's often they who are the best people to decide what to do with Twitter next. I'm going to focus on a few tweets that I found interesting that sort of speaks to an underlying capability, which I think folks on the phone here, on the computer, as well as folks outside should think about, and probably think about how you can leverage it a little bit more. One of the things that comes across easily is that speaking in a personal voice to customers is always very appealing. And I found this tweet to be particularly sort of enlightening, where someone is essentially saying that it took Twitter for marketers to understand that speaking in a personal voice within ads is actually very valuable to customers. It actually reduces the emotional distance between consumers and companies. I think we found Twitter does that fantastically well. You almost invite those brands and those companies into your life, into your timeline. And that distance that you normally have outside, even if it's a normal digital media and offline media, that emotional distance is shortened in the Twitter universe, Twitverse. This is an example from O2, the mobile carrier, I think, out of Europe and the UK. And listening to customers and helping is the first very basic step that these guys have taken, and they've done it really well. And end users ask them, what are you doing on Twitter? And their response is pretty much that. We're just here to listen to our customers and answer any questions. And that is the most simplest, lowest hanging sort of fruit for companies to get used to within Twitter. Talking about right now has a significant appeal on Twitter because Twitter is such a real-time engine where pushing out information that is about something that's going on right away is very interesting and very sort of actionable for users. This is an example again of a London bakery, I think, where what they do is they push out information as and when they have new products on the shelf. And their focus is not to build large numbers of followers, but a very small group of followers potentially, but an engaged one. This one I find pretty interesting. This was in the news reports last week, and it talks more to the mobile potential for Twitter, because Twitter goes on where the internet ends too, because Twitter is accessible over the mobile phone, so we can get our message across to even the weakest of signals. And one idea is Naked Pizza out of New Orleans, and our CEO gave them a little sort of advice. They wanted to put follow us at Twitter on their pizza boxes, and rather than that, the advice was, why don't you have them follow you via text messaging, which is much more simpler to do. Interacting directly with customers is possible on Twitter. You can do it in private. Some companies, the way they go about it is that they first respond to a customer in public, which is actually pretty good. It sort of, the viral effects let other people know on Twitter when a company is being responsive. But when it comes to solving specific problems and solving them in private, for instance, sharing personal information, it's most advisable to do that over a private channel or direct message on Twitter. Another interesting case for Twitter is when a company or an organization has a lot of content, rich content, like Sony Pictures when they're releasing the new Terminator movie. It's a great platform to release bits and pieces of information as and when they happen, or as and when they change. The content-rich environments are sort of ideally suited for Twitter. So that's about it. It's just a few slides of what I think are interesting. There are more emerging sort of ideas, and I would love to hear your feedback either via that hashtag, or you can follow me at Anamitra, A-N-A-M-I-T-R-A on Twitter, and tell me interesting use cases that you've seen and that you think are sort of leverageable and useful. That's all I had.
Okay, thanks very much, Anamitra. Up next we have Chris Abraham of Abraham Harrison. He's going to give you a bit more of a deep dive into the practicalities of running campaigns on Twitter. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he will be presenting to you all in just a moment.
So thank you so much. That was amazing, an amazing overview. What I'm going to be doing is very specific, because I know that a lot of these webinars about Twitter tend to be up at the 30,000 feet. So what I'm going to do really quickly, and there's a lot of slides in here, but I'm going to give these slides away. I put a lot of text in there so you wouldn't need context. In other words, you wouldn't need a voiceover. So I'm going to upload it to SlideShare, and I'm going to publish it on Google Docs and everything, and I'll make sure that Owen distributes it to you all. I'm Chris Abraham. I'm president of Abraham Harrison, and I have my Director of Client Services on acting as a backup. But let's see how I do on my own. What I'm primarily going to do, and I'm at Chris Abraham. My handle's Chris Abraham on Twitter, and Dan's is D13VK. Let me move on real quick. Sorry, no good hello handshake. Anyway, the premise of everything we do is surrounds the Clue Train Manifesto, which basically believes markets are conversation. And up until Twitter, it's always been very challenging to find the best way to engage people who are having conversations about you in an environment where you have an equal footing with them. I mean, going into message boards and forums or the comments section of a blog, you're always at a disadvantage. However, Twitter allows you the ability to engage with people in their space, in their environment on an equal footing, and we'll go into that more. However, really, there's an opportunity here to speak in a human voice, to tell truth, to engage with people in a very real way. And we'll go over that using an exemplar campaign that we're doing right now, that we've been doing for months, called Fresh Air, for the New York non-for-profit Fresh Air Fund. As you'll see, their Twitter handle is Fresh Air Fund. We've been doing their stuff since, I think, October 2008. I might have that wrong. However, we do this every day on their behalf. It's an amazing campaign where we use all of our mad Twitter skills for this campaign, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you kind of a portal into every single thing we do for them and on their behalf, and I'm hoping that you find it amazingly compelling. How to prospect an audience. The first thing you need to know is that your platform is completely dependent on how many people you can communicate with at any one time. That starts off at 0. The first way to get things started that we use is we open up, we turn our pockets inside out as a staff, and we also encourage our client to turn their pockets inside out by going into their Gmail account, their Yahoo account, their AOL account, Hotmail, and MSN to try to find people who are already online that they know. The equivalent of starting a viral video by emailing a link to all of your friends and going from there. So we're not embarrassed to find people and follow them immediately using email, or in this case we have a bunch of bloggers who are friends of Fresh Air Fund. We're happy to invite all of them by email, if you will, by copying and pasting a long text string separated by commas. We all know that these people are all friends of Fresh Air Fund, and we're happy to engage with them. After a little while, you can follow the suggested users that Twitter recommends for you. They're generally high-profile people like Defamer and iJustine, etc. But you can always add just 126 people. And here's the text that supports that, so we'll go right by that. Blah, blah, blah. Excellent. So then you find all these people on Twitter. And in terms of my process, our process, we don't do any discernment with regards to whom we follow, because it's sort of like a double opt-in thing. Following people requires no skin off of anybody's nose. Following back is a decision to become friends. So you can follow people willy-nilly, if you like, with one caveat, which I will talk to about in a second. So don't worry if your prospecting's targeted. You can't be too targeted with regards to Twitter following. It's not like blogger outreach. You don't have to be laser targeted. The targeting will happen in whether or not someone follows you back. However, there's a limit, a ratio between how many people you can follow versus how many people follow you back. This is a smart thing, despite what everybody says, to keep down the spammers. They've found that spammers are unattractive enough to never have any friends, and they were following people ad infinitum. And so there's a certain ratio that you have to follow, and if you follow too many people without being followed back, you get limited. So what we use is we use a tool called Social2, social2.com. They've got 2 premium services that each cost $5 each. So cheap per client. So the first one is catch up on all your previous Twitter followers. That's awesome, because anybody who's followed you, and if you haven't followed them yet, if you just want to go ahead and catch up already, as opposed to doing it by hand, you can just catch up. And then you can unfollow those Twitterers you've manually followed that are not following you back. So immediately after a week, you see that you're blocked on adding new followers. So you just come here, you zap all the people who've by virtue of their vote against you because they haven't followed you back, you just kind of scrub them off. And honestly, over time, you can continue doing that. It's sort of like bonsai. It's sort of like bonsai growing. You grow and then prune. You grow and then prune over time. So it's important to stop following people who refuse to follow you back in order to give you the freedom to follow back users who are following you. That's another important thing. I talked about that. So another way to do it is to follow the top influencers. I remember when I started with my account, I went into CC Chapman's. I followed everybody that CC Chapman followed, and I followed everybody who Dave Weiner was following, and everybody who the Scobalizer was following. it was much easier back in 2007 to do that because each of them are following in infinite numbers. However, if you go to wefollow.com, you can find the people who are top representatives in their space, such as, not to brag, but under Google PR, I'm number one because basically nobody else has chosen that. They've chosen public relations, social media, and so forth. And my buddy Alan is good, who actually, Alan is fantastic, I guess would be too long, is number two. But if you see, for example, you can go to, for example, C.C. Chapman's profile, look at everybody he's following, and then kind of look through and decide if you want to follow Rich Barrett or Adam Wainroth or Octane Media. It's a great way to start prospecting on a targeted way. The first way was a general broad net. The second way, is a very targeted way of meeting people in your space. You can find top influencers as well by going to a site called Twitterholic. Those are like the universally top people, like Ashton Kutcher and so forth. WeFollow is a great way to do things. It also allows you to sign up, add yourself to WeFollow. See that little button? And it allows you to create 3 hashtags that are associated with who you are. And I guess mine's public relations, PR, and digital PR. Okay. You can even automate following people who mention certain keywords. Twallow, TWOLLOW.com, allows you to put keywords like, theoretically, I follow back anybody who mentions Abraham Harrison, and theoretically, Fresh Air Fund follows back anybody who mentions the word Fresh Air Fund or the string Fresh Air Fund. However, it's never worked for me, but you can give it a try. Okay, what we do after we've made all these friends, after we say hello world, we talk to our client, and this might be backwards. I think I might have put this ahead because, you bake a cake before you serve a cake. So what we do with our client, Fresh Air Fund, is we want to stay on their message. We don't want to be rogue. We don't want to offer a message that is inconsistent with their goals and the goals of their board of directors. So we develop, and it's a lot of fun, we develop message models at 140 characters with links, etc., and have our point of contact approve, edit, deny, and it's so awesome because there's so many little nuances about the firm, the organization, the company that we don't know about. For example, we were using FAF to allow a shortness, a brevity, and they're like, no, we don't brand as FAF, we're Fresh Air Fund. We wouldn't have known. We also wouldn't have known that a particular fundraiser was sort of like a by invitation only thing, so sending it to Twitter was inconsistent with what they were prepared to offer. I mean, there's a lot of nuance that we don't know as an outside support firm. And I guess I say all that right here. Another thing I do is CrossPost. This allows one to really kind of grow one's own reputation, only focusing on Twitter, but also having all of your statuses updated on other pages, such as Facebook, Gtalk status, Plurk, AIM, MySpace, LinkedIn, Tumblr. This is an awesome site called ping.fm. I don't know if I put this here, but I give my staff access to my ping.fm account, and they often, what they do is whenever they post something to Fresh Air Fund, they, on my behalf, retweet it using ping.fm, where they would take this message here, and they would put RT @ Fresh Air Fund, and then all this other stuff. And I don't go into retweeting enough in this presentation, so mea maxima culpa. We can talk about it next time. Let me know if you'd like to know more about the value of retweeting. Cross-posting. Most burgeoning Twitter profiles don't have many followers. We use retweeting as a method of amplifying client message using Twitter profiles that have a longer life and more followers. In this instance, and I apologize, the screenshot was wrong. It should have RT space @ Fresh Air Fund in that message. In this instance, my team is the login and password to my personal account, which has over 6,600 followers. So it allows a small site, like a burgeoning Fresh Air Fund site back 6 months ago, to not only message to a limited amount of people, but also to message, to retweet through all of my people. So I trust my staff enough to be able to retweet. Those of you who follow me see that every day. And then you can also manage multiple Twitter accounts. If you have a practice such as a PR firm, or if you have products and services, you can register more than one Twitter account. However, in the past it used to be an abysmal problem where you would have to log out and then log back in as a different Twitterer and so forth. However, there's great tools such as Hootsuite, TweetLater, and Seismic Desktop that allow you to easily maintain more than one account. And in fact, Hootsuite allows you to send one tweet to all of your handles that are underneath you. That's a web-hosted site, Hootsuite.com. My Francophile friends love that name. And then cross-posting may be appropriate on Chris Abraham, Mark Hahn, and Abraham Harrison, but retweeting is more apt if you don't just completely control those different services. Here's an example of the Seismic Desktop. Sorry, Seismic Desktop is there, the little blue thing. But if you see on the right is the Hootsuite screenshot. Got this backwards. But if you see on the top right next to the box, you can see that all 4 accounts are selected. So if we were to type something at the top, it would post to all four. You could remove checks and so forth. Very interesting tool. Another thing people complain about is about tedious tasks. Things like Twitter feed, well, actually, TweetLater is on the upper left. TweetLater is a great tool that allows you, I don't have it on here, but TweetLater is a great tool that allows you to automatically follow back people. It allows you to automatically, if you dare, reply using direct messages, and I'll address that in a second. It allows you to unfollow people who drop you. A lot of really repetitive tasks, such as auto-follow back, unfollow people who don't follow you. TweetLater also gives you the ability to queue up your tweets. So, for example, if our Twitter expert got all those message-modeled tweets for Fresh Air Fund and wanted to put them into a queue, she could spend all Sunday queuing up on tweetlater.com all the tweets for the week that would go out at a certain time, a certain date over the course of the week, over the course of several weeks, and I believe that you can even repeat them. It's an interesting tool. I would check it out, but I'd be careful because a lot of these things are controversial. TweetLater allows you to queue up tweets like that. Some of the products are Manage My Scheduled Tweets, Delegate Management of a Twitter Account, View All My Scheduled Tweets, Add a scheduled tweet, View My New Followers, etc. Twitter Feed, which I'm told might be offline right now, and I think the alternate one is RSS2TO Tweet or RSS to Twitter, and I'll show you that in a second. Allows you to take your RSS feed and automatically post that into Twitter. I talk about that later. Here's where I explicitly tell you, resist the auto-welcome DM temptation. If you read down this list, a lot of them are appalling. Thanks for following 10beyond.com. We'll show you how to donate and watch it grow in just a few days. This was really bad. Thank you for follow. Hopefully this will help you. Link in your MLM biz. It's I wouldn't do it, guys. You know, maybe you might want to do it just to say thanks. Thanks so much for following me. But auto-follow and auto-unfollow tools are handy. I love those, especially when you get into the tens of thousands or the fives of thousands. but according to the DM inbox, you can tell that none of the messages come across with regards to the direct messages as real. Oftentimes they're rude, and there's a real witch hunt against people who use them, so don't. One important thing people ask me is, when should I tweet? There's a big misunderstanding about Twitter being a blog or a microblog. It's not. It's more like instant messenger with breadcrumbs, or it's more like a Zen blog. It's now, especially when people have especially when people follow lots of people, lots of Twitter, they follow lots of people back. So it is more in common with IM, ham radio, and commercial radio than it is with blogging. If you can see from this graphic, these are the densities of when people blog. You know, people blog at around like 3 p.m. or like noon or like 9, if you can see these hot points, maybe later in the evening. And I recommend, since more and more the most influential Twitterer are following thousands of other Twitterers, one cannot assume that anyone will see your tweet unless your tweet pops up in their river of tweets called a timeline while they're reading their tweets. People tend to tweet the most in the early morning, during lunch, in the afternoon, and maybe in the evening. There are 3 time zones in the USA, and I say that for everybody who mistakenly thought that this happened at 10 Eastern. I apologize. We'll be more explicit on that in the future. If you're only going to tweet a couple times a day, then you should choose noon and 3 p.m. Eastern. That is 9 and noon Pacific time. That's a good time. But if you're going to Twitter aggressively, tweet at 9, noon, 3, 6 Eastern, which is around 6, noon, 3 Pacific time, and that should cover the spread. Honestly, if you don't tweet when people are online, you're going to miss them. If you can see, the growth of Fresh Air Fund over time has been, we're not 20,000, but we've grown, steadily up to almost 1,800. Since we've implemented these strategies, we've grown even faster. Once I've implemented the Social 2 tool, which was the 2nd of April, when we got rid of all the people who we were following and weren't following us back, it freed us up for a huge rocket ship growth that you can see. We also have, in support of our campaign, we also have Facebook groups and pages, and a lot of cross-posting to our groups and our pages has also accelerated, as well as direct email. We make sure that people who are interested in Twitter get to know that we are on Twitter. Bloggers, we let them know. People who've blogged about Fresh Air Fund, we let them know. It's really about a cross-pollination strategy. And that's all I said. Twitter isn't a broadcast medium. It's really important to keep track of what people are saying in your replies and reply to them in a timely manner. Not only that, it's a community. It deserves conversation, praise, interaction, and reply. We thank everyone who mentions or retweets Fresh Air Fund, especially during Follow Friday. Follow Friday is a weekly opportunity for Tweeple, Tweeps, and Twitterers to share the people who they're currently following, who they recommend to others to follow, and all that requires is putting a hashtag Follow Friday, and wait till Friday, not Saturday, not Thursday. If you'll see, our thank yous include the above. Another way, as was spoken about earlier, is to search and engage, not search and destroy, but we keep our eyes out for Fresh Air Fund mentioned in search results using search.twitter.com, also using TweetDeck and Seismic. Seismic has an awesome, let me show you, here's Seismic. I can follow what's going on with Twiz. I can see what's going on with Fresh Air Fund. I can see @ here. Also, under Fresh Air Fund, I can see real time on what people are saying about the Fresh Air Fund. Seismic Desktop, excellent tool. Respond to these people. And also follow them. That's something that Dan reminded me of. Dude, you're responding to them, but you're not following them. Okay, follow everyone with whom you engage. As was mentioned before, Comcast, Network Solutions, and Ford have made their social media reps by doing active support under Comcast Cares, NetSol, Sashi B, and Scott Monty. So that's really important. When you can do this, you can keep a search running. It's called a persistent search running for your brand, for everybody in your C-suite, for your products, for your services, etc. And when people say something back. Don't engage. Don't rely on folks to always explicitly address you using your handle. And also don't expect everything that someone says about you is going to be nice, and always realize that you better stop, breathe, and think before you engage in negative conversation. Think twice about responding to negative comments unless you can solve their issue right there and then. If you have the authority to solve their problem right then, all you're doing is playing with tar babies. Another two ways to see that in the mode of Google Alert is tweetbeep.com and tweelert.com. They both offer via email Google Alert style alerts via email, says the redundant man. And here's another example of replies. I am so excited that you applied to become a Fresh Air Fun Host family for a child this summer. So exciting, good luck, etc. I think it's very important to let people know that they're being heard, and then they appreciate you. But my last point really is that there's no community building panacea. All community building takes time. There are many promises but few panacea. If you're a big celebrity or brand already, you're golden. However, if you're not a star, there's still thousands of people who are interested in what you have to say. So be online, be consistent, be transparent, be open, be responsive. But building community is a marathon and not a sprint. And most people who engage me want everything to happen in like 1 to 3 months. And this has been 8 months, and or 6 months, and we've had amazing success. But it's sort of like a hockey stick. It goes up eventually at a much more rapid rate. We've seen a lot of growth since the Oprah/Ashton increase in Twitter members. So a lot of people, promise things like there's this thing called Hummingbird that promised 10,000 followers overnight. We have almost 1,800 followers, but we've been online since October 2008. We've just grown and grown and grown. And the last thing is, if you don't have anything to say, doesn't mean you shouldn't grab your Twitter feed, your Twitter ID. You can always use tools like, if you can see here, I have Marketing Conversation, which is my blog for marketing, for conversation marketing. We really don't engage there. What we do is we repost our blog posts using tool like Twitter feed or RSS to Twitter. Just get your Twitter handle right away, because if you don't commit, if you're not ready to commit resources for business, grab your handle, squat on it, because Frank Luntz didn't grab his, and someone at a local firm here grabbed his and Twittered as Frank Luntz for like months and months and months and months, and Frank didn't have control of his brand. So go out and grab them today. If you'll see, this is the blog that I retweet here. And that's it. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Don't forget, conversation is #Twiz. And I'm going to give you to Owen now.
Give us just a moment and we'll be ready to start dealing with everyone's questions. So I think Chris and Anamitra, I think you're both up there and ready to go. I'm going to start you with kind of a bit of a different question, and that is, and by the way, please keep answers short because we have 15 minutes to get through a lot of questions. What is a good voice or tone to use in tweets? What do you find to be effective? And Chris, why don't you go first? Or Anamitra, you started. Go ahead, Anamitra.
Okay. I think it's a personal voice that generally works, but it also depends on I think the goal. For instance, CNN breaking news, their goal is to let people know about the news, and they're not following anybody. They have 1 million followers, and the goal is to get the message out. So all they have is a headline. That's that's fine. It depends on what you want to do. With Twitter, that sort of determines your voice. If you are there to build a community and that you want to interact, maybe having a more personal touch, a personal tone is better. And remember, there is no pressure on Twitter. You don't have to follow those you don't want to follow. You don't have to get your grammar right. There is no spell check. You can be, it's sort of like a very casual conversation if you want it to be that. If you want it to be more formal, it's up to you.
Okay, Chris, how about you?
Well, I think the reason why we reserved the domain name Mea Culpa Marketing is because we never engage anybody with horns. We only engage people with hugs. Most rancor and so forth is the direct result of people just having a terrible time in the rest of their lives. So we're just a little final drop that allows everything to overflow. So we really take a very neutral but a very gentle, and when we're being personal, a very soft and warm embrace, if you will. We find that's the best way to deal with it but if you notice, our official tweet messages are informational and very, not terse, but you need to keep things down to 140 characters. But whenever we reply or whenever we engage people we don't know, I don't know if this is a technical term, but we try to be sweetie pies.
Okay. I'm going to just move right on. Do you think retweeting too much is a bad thing? Are there ramifications of doing a lot of retweeting?
So I don't, this is on a menstrual. I don't think there is any sort of ramification unless it's an automated retweet or a bot or some kind, which is not really a retweet. If you genuinely feel interested and engaged in sharing that information to your followers, or if you want to spread the word about something and you do it yourself, there's actually nothing wrong. There's no limitation. There's one thing I want to say is that there are no rules really. It's part of sort of community culture in a way. It's what best practices we learn ourselves that we want to spread. So there are really no sort of upper bound, lower bound, no number to hit in any particular event. There are positive sort of behaviors we want to encourage. And one of the things we're doing internally is sort of taking stock of, especially helping people who are just getting on Twitter and don't know quite what to do and what are the sort of rules of the road or sort of basic steps to think about. We're documenting all of that and putting it up. We'll be putting it up on our website at some point soon, which is sort of like a 101 almost of here's what basics of Twitter is. So some things will become more clear there.
Okay, excellent. Chris?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Is retweeting too much a bad thing?
Well, the only blowback I've had is when I'm out on a mobile device and I see an interesting topic and I retweet it without checking the link, and I get rickrolled where someone follows my link because they trust me, and it goes to something really awful or a CrossPost or something like that. So I would do the due diligence surrounding what you retweet, because I found out yesterday that if you retweet, basically retweeting is the equivalent of giving a thumbs up, or it can even be associated with what your personal opinion and leanings are. So snarky retweets, unless you're explicit about snarky, you should be careful, because it's effectively, if you will, if you're dig.com, you're effectively digging or giving thumbs up to that content. And if people trust you, but here's another thing. You can actually, in terms of business, retweeting is a great way to get attention from people who don't know you yet. It's sort of like blogging about other people and linking to them. It's a great way of quote-unquote business flirting. It's much better than following someone. It's actually saying that you're listening to them. They're not in a room tweeting alone, that you've found what they're saying good enough to share with your people. So for business, retweeting can be an amazingly effective tool, and there's nothing better than it. Just be careful when you retweet something. Make sure you know where it's from and check the link out before you retweet it.
Okay, thank you. Next question. This is actually a very interesting one for, I think, our audience, which is better when tweeting for an organization? Should I be tweeting with an anonymous voice, i.e. as the company, say Southwest Airlines or Comcast Cares, or should I be tweeting as a person, as a actual company representative? And why don't we have Chris? Anamita, go ahead, just starting.
So what we've seen a number of things happen there. The general principles are if it's a company that is not using that username to push out one-way information or push out just pure information, it makes sense to personalize, and there are various ways you can personalize. Well, one thing is even though, for instance, you might put up a company logo or company brand in the profile picture section, and the name could be the company's name. In the bio section, you could put in your name and say, here's this person or persons talking from Comcast, or another example. And generally personalizing that, showing some maybe photos of your offsite or some meeting, it brings people closer to, it brings consumers closer to that brand because they know that there are real faces behind that brand who are communicating with you. So personalize, and there are various sort of tactics on how you can personalize. You can play around with the photos, you can play around with the bio, you can play around with the name, you can play around with the URL that you have, or you can play around with the tweets that you actually send out. But sort of the general direction is to personalization for brands or larger companies or in companies in general is better because people relate to people better.
Okay, Chris?
I totally agree. I think that, for example, Network Solutions, since I know Shashi from down here in Virginia, he's our local hero and star. But people ask him, Sashi B, they ask him for network solution help. They ask him for social media help. NetSol, N-E-T-S-O-L exists too, and that's a perfectly good place to get information. But I think in terms of, Cluetrain Manifesto, there really is the face of Sashi. There really is knowing that when he replies, you have a high-level person who has authority and the ability to make change. So I would say if you can, if you choose a persona, a person persona, I mean, if you have a person do it for you and build their own personal brand, also make sure that you have your a corporate brand as well on Twitter. And what you just said is really important too. Not enough people spend enough time making their Twitter page pretty. There's ways of adding. If you saw from the CC Chapman page, he actually has his picture back there and his email address and all the podcasts that he does and his association with Advanced Guard back there. Add a full bio, make sure the link you have is good. People, before they follow you back, they check those things. So if you do a half et cetera job on your look and feel, it'll look like, it'll look robotic and will look personal. So I agree.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to switch gears a bit. We're going to have a bit more of a specific question. Is there a way to aggregate Twitter search results?
So let me take that. One of the things we're doing in a big way on search is allowing people to let me back up. So today the search experience is not on the main Twitter page. You have to go to search.twitter.com for most users. We are going to bring search more and more as a front and center experience of Twitter, because we think beyond just updating tweets onto Twitter, sharing or discovering what other people have said is also an enlightening way of figuring out how Twitter can be valuable. So we're going to bring search more front and center. And one of the sort of capabilities would be, if there are search terms that you search for quite often, you can actually save those searches so that you don't have to re-enter that keyword into the box all the time. You just hit that word and it will reside somewhere very close and easy for you. For instance, what I just did was I was searching on hashtag TWIZ Twiz. And instead of hitting refresh all the time, all I did was save my search, and that word appears in my sort of homepage now. So we're going to make search easier. We're going to make aggregation of that specific search term and saving that term for later searches.
Excellent. Chris, do you have anything to add? Or any
Yeah,
thoughts?
another way you can do it is you can use Boolean search on search.twitter.com or on, I think you can do the same thing for TweetDeck or for Seismic. And someone asked whether to use Seismic or TweetDeck. I'll answer that in 1 second. But you can use Boolean search to search more than one term. I just put, hash Twiz or, quote, Chris space Abraham, quote, or Chris Abraham, one word. And if I hit reply, it'll bring up all three of those searches into an aggregated search. So it'll show all the Twiz mentions, all the Chris space Abraham mentions, and all the Chris Abraham as one word mentions. So if you do a little bit of research on Boolean search strings, you can aggregate all those searches into one. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And why don't you go ahead and answer the Seismic versus TweetDeck?
So I really love TweetDeck, but TweetDeck doesn't allow you to manage more than one profile. So we use Seismic Desktop now because if you're able to willy-nilly go between all of your different handles. So I can keep track. I put in the login and passwords for Fresh Air Fund, OLX_English, Abraham Harrison, Mark Hahn, Chris Abraham, etc. And I can just zip between those, see the kind of replies I have, see the direct messages, and then I can quickly reply using any of those handles as well. So Seismic Desktop, if you're going to be doing something for a client or for more than one handle, or if you're doing a new consultancy, doing Twitter consulting or Twitter services, I would use Seismic.
Okay, excellent. I've switched the screen to try and show as much as well I can the live feed from the Twiz hashtag, #Twiz, partly because we've had a number of questions from the audience about what hashtags are and how to use them. We do have about 20% of our audience is fairly new to Twitter. And so I'm going to turn this over to you guys. You can talk to what's on the screen or just give them your overview of how to use a hashtag. And I'm going to ask you to follow up with how do you think businesses are and should be using hashtags and the information they can gather from them to take further action. And why don't we start with Anamitra?
Thanks. So the hashtag is a way you can tag your tweet. Now, just stepping back from folks who either know it or don't know it, it's not the most elegant solution to a problem, which is the real problem is how do I aggregate similar types of tweets or similar topics together in one place? Twitter doesn't really have any feature that does it automatically. It's pretty feature basic right now. We realize that there's an opportunity here, and then what's great is the community has come up with a way of figuring that out. For instance, using the hash sign at the end of any kind of tweet helps other users aggregate that tweet together. For instance, I think someone from Ford, after every single tweet that he sends out, he adds the hash sign #4, so that whenever he's searching, whenever everybody adds that #4 to the tweet that they send out, the Ford person knows that that tweet is about Ford, even though the word may not appear within the tweet itself. So that's the way it's aggregated. It is very similar to users coming up with the @reply symbol. That was started by users. Very, very similar to the users coming up with a retweet symbol, which is RT. These are all user driven, and then the hash is a way to sort of aggregate or tag explicitly every single tweet into a group.
Chris?
Well, for any of you guys who are old enough to remember, there's this thing called IRC, and IRC reminds me a lot of Twitter, where rooms do not exist in IRC until you create them. And the way you create them is to, you basically say, let's say a room is called Zope. I used to be a geek, so Zope on IRC would be #Zope. That would spawn a room that everybody would keep alive by actually using that space. And then when everybody left the room, the Zope room would disappear. That's how hashtags work. There's no registrar like domain names that decide what a hashtag is going to be. It's an emergent self-labeling. I mean, we had to do a search on search.twitter.com to see how broadly Twiz was being used. I found out that Twiz means $20 of marijuana, but aside from that, on the street, but aside from that, not many people used it. So we just decided to use it because it's short and it means Twitter business. And so you can just make one up if someone's not using it, or if you want to revive someone else based on a subject, For example, the first person who started seeing tweets about Mumbai, at ground zero, someone just decided to put #Mumbai. And then when everybody picked it up, it became the brand for that everybody could search on.
Okay, I'm going to step in. We're running right out of time. I've got one last question for both of you, which is a very practical one, which is how do you cope or manage with following over 2,000 people?
I have an answer for that.
Go right ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, what I do is, when I wake up in the morning, I use Twibble. I use Twibble on my N95, and I go in there and I spend an hour every morning reading what everybody else says in my feed. And for an hour, I retweet, I reply, I laugh, I goose, I say good morning, all that kind of stuff for about an hour. I treat Twitter like a river. I step in, I interact, and I step out. And all this stuff happens when I'm not there. Maybe at around 1 o'clock I'll have an hour. I'll do that for another hour. In the evening I'll do that again. I cannot assume it's my inbox. I can't keep up with everybody's tweet. I just sort of step in, like turning on the TV, seeing what's on, and then getting off. That's how I do it. I do it all the time.
Okay, and Anamitra?
Really quickly, I think the problem of managing followers and following large number of tweets is a real problem. We haven't really come up with a decent solution for that yet. A couple of notes. One is no one expects you to read everything. People expect you to glide through, and because it's a zero or low commitment zone, Twitter is the way it's set up. No one expects you to read everything that they say. Number two, today people follow a large number of people not because they want to consume their information or not because they want to see them in their timeline or they actually want to engage with them, but for some other reason. And there are some other reasons for that. We should probably be thinking as a company and a product of how do we solve for those other reasons. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, well, that's it, everybody. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much to Chris Abraham and Anamitra Banerjee for presenting to us. And I wanted to remind everyone an archived version of this presentation will be made available. You'll get an email with a link to it in a couple of days' time. Thanks very much, and have a great day.